Commander Elias Kane stood alone in the quiet room of his small apartment on Titan. The outer colony moon was always cold and silent, and Kane liked it that way. But tonight the silence felt different, heavier, almost waiting for something to happen. He had just returned from a long shift at the orbital docks when he found a package sitting on his table. It was small, wrapped in a thin layer of metallic fiber, and there was no sender's name, only his own written in faded black ink. His heart beat a little faster as he picked it up. It was light but solid, like it held more meaning than weight. He turned it in his hands, wondering who could have sent it and why. The surface of the package was warm to the touch, strange for something that had been delivered hours ago. He pulled at the wrapping, careful not to tear it too fast, and inside he found a thin crystal plate, clear and smooth, but with glowing lines running across it like frozen lightning. Kane had seen many old artifacts during his service in the Galactic Fleet, but nothing like this as the light from his desk lamp touched the crystal. The lines began to shift, forming patterns, stars, constellations, a map. It was a star map, but not one he recognized. The formations were wrong. Some stars were missing, others brighter, and his training told him that this was not a recent scan. It was ancient, older than the Federation itself, maybe older than humanity's first step into space. Kane's eyes moved across the glowing lines until something caught his attention. One small gap where a system should have been. It was not empty space. He could see faint connections in the pattern, like the system had been erased. The coordinates were still there, but the symbol for the planet was gone. A cold feeling spread through him. He leaned closer to the map, his breath fogging the crystal for a moment. He tapped the coordinates into his handheld scanner. The device hummed, and then hesitated. A warning flashed on the screen. Data classified. Access denied. Kane frowned. He was not a stranger to locked data, but this was different. The block was not a normal security lock. It was old, ancient code layered over modern encryption, like someone had been hiding this for thousands of years, and updating the locks as time passed. He sat back in his chair, staring at the crystal plate. Why would anyone erase a planet from all records? And why send this to him? The room seemed to grow colder, though the heater still hummed softly in the corner. Outside his window, the rings of Saturn glowed faintly against the black. Distant lights of ships moved between colonies, but Kane barely noticed. His mind was already racing through possibilities. An old war secret, a dangerous experiment, or something stranger. His comm unit beeped. A message from an unknown source blinked on the small display. The text was short and sharp. "Do not search for it." Kane read it twice, a shiver running down his spine. Before he could type a reply, the message vanished. The comm log erased itself. He checked again, but there was nothing, no trace. His training told him that whoever sent that message had high-level tech, the kind used by intelligence agents or those who did not want to be found. Kane was not the kind of man to ignore something like this. During the Terran Wars, he had seen how secrets could destroy whole fleets, how one missing piece of truth could cost thousands of lives. And this felt the same, maybe worse. His instincts whispered that the map was dangerous, but also important. He needed to know why this world was removed. What could be so terrible that entire generations of record keepers kept it hidden? He placed the crystal map into a secure case and slid it into his jacket pocket. The weight felt heavier now, like it carried history and danger together. He walked to his terminal and connected to the Galactic Archive. The screen filled with the familiar emblem of the Federation. He entered his credentials, higher than most civilians but still within military retirement limits, and began the search. At first, the system returned normal results for the coordinates. A blank area of space. No planets, no stations, nothing, but Kane ran a deep trace, digging past standard data filters. After a long pause, the screen flickered, and a live feed opened without his request. An elderly archivist appeared, her hair white, her eyes sharp despite her age. She looked straight at him and spoke in a low voice. "You have something you should not have, Commander Kane." He felt his jaw tighten, asking her what she meant, but she shook her head. "Do not look for that world. It was removed for a reason, for the safety of all." Kane pressed for more, asking what was there, what danger it held. But the archivist only repeated, "Forget it, destroy whatever you found, and never speak of it again." Then the connection cut to static, and the terminal shut itself down. Kane sat in the dim light, The quiet of the room now feeling alive with shadows. He had heard that tone before, in the voices of officers who knew too much but were forbidden to speak. It was the same sound before the most dangerous missions of the war, when soldiers were told just enough to act but not enough to understand, and it never meant anything good. The old star map lay in his pocket, its faint glow seeping through the fabric like it was calling to him. He walked to the small window, looking out at the stars, wondering if somewhere out there the missing world was still waiting, untouched, forgotten, or maybe guarded. The idea that the map had been sent to him on purpose felt stronger now. But why him? Of all people, he had been retired for years. No command, no crew, no reason to be involved in something like this, unless someone wanted him because he had nothing to lose. The more he thought about it, the more certain he became that he could not let it go. The warning messages, the fear in the archivist's voice, the classified coordinates, all of it pointed to something big, something the galaxy did not want anyone to see. And if Kane had learned anything in his years of service, it was that the bigger the secret, the more important the truth behind it. He turned away from the window, his mind already planning the next steps. He would need a ship, supplies, and a reason to disappear from official records for a while. He ran his hand over the map case, feeling the smooth edges under his fingers, thinking about the millions of stars in the galaxy and how one missing world could change everything. Maybe it was nothing but an empty rock. Maybe it was something far worse, but there was only one way to find out, and Kane was not the kind of man to walk away from the unknown. The hum of the heater seemed louder now, the air colder. Outside, the rings of Saturn shone in pale light. The ships moved like fireflies against the darkness, and Kane felt the weight of the crystal map like a heartbeat in his pocket, steady, insistent, as if reminding him that the journey had already begun, even before he left the room. The next morning came slow and cold, Titan's pale light seeping through the thin glass of Kane's apartment window. His eyes were open long before the alarm buzzed. The crystal map still sat inside its case on the desk beside him, glowing faintly in the shadows. Kane had not slept much. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the missing world, an empty space in the pattern of stars calling to him like a voice he could not quite hear. He rose from his bed with the same careful movements he had learned in the service, the quiet kind where each step meant something. He dressed in his old duty jacket, heavy from age, but still good enough for the cold air of Titan streets. He knew if he was going to follow this trail, he needed answers. Not rumors, not half-truths, real information. He remembered the face of the archivist from the night before, her voice trembling, as if she had touched a wound that still hurt after centuries. Kane had dealt with people like her before, those who carried secrets so heavy that speaking them would crush everything they knew. But the more they told him to stop, the more he felt the pull to continue. There was a reason this world had been erased, and if history had taught him anything, it was that secrets this old often shaped the fate of entire civilizations. Kane walked to the small docking bay on the southern ridge of New Carthage, the settlement that stretched like a frozen scar across Titan's icy surface. The air was bitter, thin wind curling between steel towers and storage domes. He kept his head low as he passed vendors and ship crews preparing for the next off-world runs. The less people remembered seeing him here, the better. His destination was a place known as Bay 17, a quiet corner where a few independent freighter captains kept their vessels, and where a man could get off Titan without filling out a dozen clearance forms. In the far corner of Bay 17 sat the Iron Wing, his old ship from the last days of the war, retired like him but still functional, its black hull scratched and scarred from years of service. Kane had kept it here under a false registry, paying docking fees in cash. It was not fast, not beautiful, but could take him to the far edges of the galaxy without drawing attention. He climbed the ramp, the scent of old metal and fuel filling his lungs, each step echoing in the quiet hold. He ran a hand over the control panel, the surface cold beneath his fingers, memories of old missions flooding back, faces of crew long gone, battles fought under dying suns. Before leaving, Kane knew he had to try one more time to dig into the Federation records. Maybe there was another archivist less afraid, or someone reckless enough to talk. He powered up the Iron Wing's comm array, the hum of ancient circuits filling the cabin, and connected to the Deep Archives channel. This time the response came not from human face, but from a low, distorted voice without form. The words came slow, each one heavy. "The coordinates you hold are not for you. Commander, they are. Marked under code black since the dawn of recorded history. Leave them alone, or you will not return." Kane's jaw tightened. He asked what was there, but the voice only repeated that it was forbidden. Then the channel cut with a sharp burst of static. His console flickered and went dark. He sat for a moment, listening to the soft hum of the ship around him. The air felt thicker, as if the warning had weight. He knew code black was not given lightly. In his time as a commander, he had only seen it used twice. Once for a biological weapon capable of wiping out planets, and once for a location where an entire fleet vanished without trace. This world must be worse to be hidden for so long. He reached into his jacket and pulled out the map case. The crystal inside pulsed faintly like it was alive. The glow grew brighter when he brought it closer to the NAV controls, and the ship's system tried to read the data. Kane watched as the coordinates appeared on the display, a set of numbers that burned themselves into his mind. The system marked the destination deep inside a region known only as the Black Expanse, a part of the galaxy avoided by trade routes and patrols, where ships went missing and signals died without reason. The chart showed no stars near it except one faint light, the system at the very center of the Forbidden Zone. Kane leaned back in his seat, the decision forming in his mind like a storm. He could leave now, take the Iron Wing, and follow the map. But doing so meant crossing into space where no help would come if things went wrong. He thought about the people who might be behind the package. Why send it to him? Why now? Maybe they knew the Federation would bury the truth forever. Maybe they needed someone who would not obey the warnings. Someone who had already seen the worst and survived. The engines of the Iron Wing roared to life. The vibration running through the floor. Kane locked the coordinates into the NAV system. The course line stretched across the star chart like a thread into darkness. He set the ship to low-profile mode, reducing emissions to avoid being tracked. He knew if the Federation wanted to stop him, they could, but if he was careful, he might reach the Expanse before anyone realized where he was going. Outside the bay, the pale surface of Titan gleamed under. The distant sun, ice plains stretching to the horizon, and beyond that the deep black of open space. As the ship lifted from the docking platform, Kane kept his eyes on the stars, the weight of the crystal map heavy in his pocket, his hands steady on the controls, the hum of the ship like a heartbeat in the silence. He passed through the thin atmosphere and into the void, the rings of Saturn glowing in the distance, a reminder of the small beauty in a cold galaxy. Behind him, Titan shrank to a pale speck. Ahead of him, the path to the forbidden world stretched far and empty. For hours, the Iron Wing moved through Federation space without trouble. Kane kept the ship's transponder running on a false ID. The comm channels quiet except for background noise. He checked the course again and again, each time seeing the faint blue sun of the target system at the end of the route. It was still days away, but the feeling in his chest told him he was already crossing a line he could never return from. Near the edge of the regulated sectors, the warning beacons began to appear, automated signals blinking on the console. Restricted space ahead, entry forbidden. Kane ignored them, pushing the ship forward. The stars ahead seemed darker, their light fading faster than it should. The sensors began to lose contact with distant points, like the galaxy itself was closing a door behind him. He felt the air in the cabin grow colder, though the temperature controls were steady, the silence around him deeper than before. As the last beacon disappeared from the scanner, Kane took a slow breath, his hands gripping the controls tighter. Beyond this point, there would be no help, no patrols, no stations, only whatever waited at the heart of the Expanse. He thought again of the arc of his eyes, the voice on the comm, the erased records, and the long shadow of history that seemed to stretch from that missing world, and he knew this was no simple mystery. This was something that had scared the galaxy in his silence for longer than any living mind could remember, and now it was his to face. The Iron Wing moved deeper into the Black Expanse, its engines whispering through the void. Kane sat in the pilot's seat, watching the starfield ahead grow thinner. Each passing hour, the galaxy behind him faded into a dim haze, The stars ahead were faint like dying embers in a sea of ink. The navigational computer flickered more often now, sensors struggling to lock onto distant points. Strange interference rolled through the systems like invisible waves. Sometimes the readings would spike with impossible values, then drop to zero as if nothing had happened. Kane kept one hand near the manual override, every sound and vibration in the ship feeling sharper here. The first sign of the expanse's strangeness came when the ship's comm unit picked up a signal that should not exist, a faint rhythmic pulse repeating every few seconds. Not random static, but deliberate. Kane ran it through the analyzer. The results showed no match with any known language or code, yet the pattern felt unsettlingly human, like an old heartbeat slowed down and stretched across space. He muted the signal, but the pattern seemed to echo in his mind. A slow beat that would not fade no matter how much he tried to ignore it. As he pushed further, the black around him seemed to change, not just darker, but heavier, like the space here was thicker than normal. The ship's thrusters strained more than they should at this speed. Lights in the cabin dimmed slightly, even though power levels were stable. Kane had flown through radiation storms and gravity wells, but this felt different, like something was pressing on the ship from all directions, testing it, measuring it, and maybe measuring him as well. He checked the map again, the glowing lines of the ancient crystal still bright inside the case on the console. The coordinates were less than 2 days away now, the blue sun faintly visible ahead through the forward viewport. A cold shimmer against the endless black. Kane leaned forward, his breath slow. The sun looked wrong, its light too pale, almost metallic, and the space around it seemed to warp slightly like heat haze, even though there was nothing between them but the void. Hours passed without a single sign of other ships, not even debris or wreckage, as if no one had ever dared to cross this far. Kane tried to rest in the pilot chair, but every time he closed his eyes, he felt the hum of the ship in a different rhythm. Not the steady beat of the engines, but that slow, unnatural pulse from the signal earlier. He rose and moved to the small observation deck at the rear of the Iron Wing. Looking back at the path he had taken, the stars behind seemed farther away then. They should, dim and small like memories fading from the edge of thought. He felt as if the expanse was swallowing the light itself. When he returned to the cockpit, the sensors were flashing, picking up something massive ahead. Not the planet yet, but a structure floating between him and the blue sun. As the ship closed the distance, the details came into view. A colossal ring made of black stone and twisted metal, drifting silently in the void. It was ancient beyond measure, cracks running through its surface, strange symbols carved deep into its sides. The ring's diameter was so vast that the Iron Wing could pass through it. Without coming close to the edges, Kane felt a shiver as he realized the symbols were the same style as those on the obelisk he had seen in the crystal map's projection earlier. Human, but impossibly old. As the ship entered the ring's shadow, the sensors went completely blind. Every system froze for exactly 10 seconds, then restarted on their own. Kane had no control during that time. Only the quiet sound of his own breathing and the low groan of the hull, as if the Iron Wing was being scanned by something unseen. When control returned, the navigation display showed a strange change. His distance to the coordinates had dropped by half, as if the ship had crossed space faster than possible. Kane looked back through the viewport, but the ring was gone. Only empty blackness remained. He wondered if he had really passed through it or if it had been some kind of vision. But the time lost on the chronometer was real. The next day, the blue sun grew larger, its light spilling across the Iron Wing's hull in a cold silver wash. Kane could now see the faint outline of the planet circling it, a small sphere with a surface glimmering faintly under the pale light. He reduced speed, not trusting the comm. The sensors picked up no satellites, no ships, no sign of movement in orbit. Yet the interference in the systems grew worse the closer he came. The comm panel flickered again. This time the static shaped into a voice, not the archivist's, not the deep warning from before, but something softer, almost familiar, calling his name slowly, stretching the sound until it barely felt like his own. Kane shut off the comm, his jaw tight. He had heard stories during the war about strange sectors that could mimic voices from a person's past, a kind of psychic weapon, but no one had ever proved they were real. Now he was not so sure. He tried to shake off the unease by focusing on the landing plan. The atmosphere looked thin but breathable, gravity just under Earth standard, perfect conditions for life. Yet the scan showed no cities, no roads, not even ruins, only vast plains and clusters of tall structures shaped like crystal spires. The closer he got, the stranger it became. The planet's rotation was slow, giving the surface a long twilight glow. Clouds moved lazily across the horizon, and the spires reflected the blue light in sharp flashes like beacons. Kane guided the Iron Wing toward a wide flat plain near one of the tallest spires. The ship's landing gear touching the strange glassy surface with a hollow echo. He powered down the engines. The sudden silence filling the cabin like a physical weight outside the viewport. The spire towered higher than any building he had seen, its surface carved with the same deep lines as the ring in space, glowing faintly as if lit from within. Kane secured the crystal map in his pack and stepped into his old exploration suit, the helmet's display flickering for a moment before stabilizing. The air outside read as breathable, but he kept the helmet sealed. The ramp lowered with a slow hiss, revealing the stillness of the alien plane. No wind, no sound. Only the pale light of the blue sun casting long shadows across the glassy ground. He stepped forward, each boot print echoing faintly in the silence, his gaze fixed on the base of the spire where an opening waited, dark and inviting, like the mouth of something ancient that had been waiting for him all along. He approached slowly, his hand brushing the surface of the spire. The material was smooth and cold, almost like polished stone, but humming faintly under his touch. The hum matched the slow pulse he had felt in the ship, the same rhythm from the mysterious signal in deep space. He felt the vibration run through his arm and into his chest, like it was measuring his heartbeat. The opening before him widened into a tunnel that sloped gently downward, lined with more glowing carvings. The air inside, warmer than outside, carrying a faint scent of metal and something older, like dust that had not been disturbed for thousands of years. Kane hesitated at the threshold, looking back at the Iron Wing sitting alone on the plain, its black hull a small defiance against the pale light. Then he turned toward the tunnel and stepped inside. The hum grew louder with each step, the light from the carvings pulsing in sync with the beat he now realized was no longer just in his head. It was in the ground, in the air, in the walls around him, guiding him deeper into the heart of the spire, toward whatever waited at the center of this forgotten world. The tunnel carried Kane deeper into the spire, each step echoing softly against the smooth floor. The walls glowed with shifting light patterns that seemed to move in response to him, sometimes forming shapes that almost looked like stars, other times twisting into symbols he could not read. The air grew warmer the further he went, carrying a faint vibration that he could feel in his bones. The hum had grown steady now, a heartbeat not his own, a pulse that belonged to the structure itself. It was like walking inside a living thing. After several minutes, the tunnel opened into a vast chamber, so large that the far walls were lost in shadow. Above him, the ceiling curved high like the inside of a dome. Faint streams of blue light dripped down from points in the stone like liquid stars. In the center of the chamber stood an obelisk of dark stone, towering nearly as high as the spire itself, its surface covered in deep carvings, each line glowing with the same pale blue as the crystal map in his pack. Kane approached slowly, his footsteps soft against the stone floor. The silence here was complete. Not even the hum seemed to exist now, as if the obelisk demanded its own stillness. When he reached it, he placed a hand against the surface. The stone was cold but seemed to thrum faintly under his palm. The carvings shifted slightly like ripples across water, and then they began to change, lines bending and twisting until they formed letters he could read. Human letters, though worn and strange. The language was old, far older than any modern tongue. Yet somehow his mind understood it, as if the stone itself whispered the meaning directly to him. The words told a story of a time before the Federation, before recorded history, when humans had walked among the stars with powers now long forgotten. The story spoke of a war that had burned across the galaxy, a war not fought between nations, but between humanity and something else, something described only as the shadow of light, a being that was not one, but many, able to cross the void without ships, able to live in the hearts of stars, able to shape worlds and minds to its will. It had consumed hundreds of systems before the ancients had found a way to bind it. Using a prison world forged from crystal and stone, buried deep under the surface so no light or darkness could touch it. They sealed the creature away and erased the planet from all maps, leaving only guardians to remember the truth. Cain stepped back, his breath slow. The words glowed brighter, as if urging him to understand more. The obelisk spoke of a key hidden within the spire, a device that could either strengthen the prison for another 1,000 years or break it forever. The choice was left to whoever found it. But the warning was clear. The shadow of light was patient. It could whisper across centuries, plant thoughts in distant minds, and lure the curious to its cage. Cain felt the weight of those words sink into him, wondering if the map he had been given was not a tool of discovery, but bait. A low tremor rolled through the floor, subtle at first, then stronger. Dust drifted down from the ceiling. The hum returned, but now it was deeper, slower, like something vast moving beneath the chamber. Cain looked toward the far side where a second tunnel led down, the glow of the carvings spilling into the darkness beyond. He knew the prison must be down there, deep under the crust of this silent world, and whatever was inside was stirring. He approached the tunnel, each step measured, the air here warmer still, carrying a faint metallic taste. The walls seemed closer, the light dimmer, the hum louder. He could feel it in his chest now, not just through his boots, as if the sound was inside him. He descended for several minutes until the tunnel opened into another chamber, this one smaller but more intense, the walls lined with crystal veins pulsing with light. In the center stood a pedestal holding a small object shaped like a half-sphere, black as shadow, its surface absorbing the glow around it. Cain reached for it, but hesitated. The air seemed to tighten, the hum growing into a slow voice in his mind. Not words exactly, but the shape of thought, an invitation, an offering. Images flashed in his head, visions of him standing at the head of fleets, worlds bending to his will, the galaxy remade under his command. The voice promised power, freedom, and the end of all wars. He stepped back, his hands trembling. The pedestal seemed to pulse in response, the light in the crystals flaring and dimming like breath. He turned away, heading back toward the obelisk, his mind racing. The choice was too dangerous to make now. He needed to think, to understand why he had been brought here. As he reached the great chamber again, he saw the carvings on the obelisk shifting once more, this time forming an image of the blue sun outside. But now the light around it was darkening, the edges curling inward like claws. Cain realized the prison was not just failing. It was already breaking. The creature beneath the surface was pushing against its bonds. Another tremor shook the chamber, stronger than before. Cracks appeared in the stone floor, thin at first but spreading fast. A low roar like distant thunder echoed from the deep tunnel. Cain moved quickly to the exit, the hum following him like a living shadow. The glowing lines on the walls flickered, as if uncertain. Outside the spire, the pale light of the blue sun was dimmer, clouds moving unnaturally fast across the sky. The air carried a faint vibration that had not been there before. From a landing site, he could see the horizon shifting, crystal spires swaying as if in a great wind, though the air remained still. The ground beneath the iron wing trembled, dust rising from unseen cracks. Cain climbed the ramp and powered the engines. The ship's systems struggled to respond, interference crawling through every circuit, as if the world itself was trying to hold him in place. The hum was inside the cabin now, in the walls, in the controls. His hands moved faster, forcing the ship to lift from the surface, breaking free of the strange pull. As the iron wing rose above the plane, he saw it, a vast ripple moving across the ground toward the spire. The crystal towers lighting up one by one in a wave of pale blue, then darkening as the ripple passed. In the distance, the crust of the planet split open, a faint light spilling upward like a wound in the world. The hum rose into a deep echo that shook the hull. Kane pulled the ship higher. The sky above warping in strange patterns, as if space itself was bending. He looked down one last time. The spire now glowing brighter than ever, beams of light shooting from its tip into the thin clouds. The obelisk deep inside must have been reacting to the breach, trying to contain whatever was beneath, but Kane knew from the words he had read that the prison could only hold for so long without the key, and that choice still waited for him, whether he wanted it or not. As the Iron Wing broke through the upper atmosphere, he felt the pull of the world lessen, but the hum remained faint in the back of his mind, a reminder that the shadow of light now knew his name. The Iron Wing drifted through the upper edges of the planet's atmosphere, the blue sun casting cold light over the hull. Kane's hands gripped the controls as he fought the strange resistance still tugging at the ship. It was not gravity and not magnetism. It felt alive, like invisible hands pulling against him. But at last the ship broke free into the quiet dark above the world. The pull faded, leaving only the faint hum in the back of his mind, soft but steady, like a pulse that was not his own. He set a course for high orbit, the stars sliding into view beyond the curve of the planet. The surface below seemed calm from here, no hint of the tremors or the strange light that had burst from the spire. But Kane knew that was a lie. He had seen the cracks, had felt the weight of the thing beneath, and he could still sense it now, a presence just at the edge of thought, not speaking yet, but aware, watching, waiting. Minutes passed in silence. The only sound inside the cabin was the low hum of the engines. Kane reached for the comm panel, trying to send a signal to any Federation relay in range. But the system flickered and failed, the screen filling with static and faint blue light patterns that twisted like the carvings on the obelisk. The hum in his head grew louder as the static moved, and for a moment the shapes almost looked like words. Words in his own language, telling him he was not alone. He cut the signal, a sharp breath escaping him. The silence returned, but the sense of being watched did not fade. He checked the scanners. The display showed only empty space, no ships, no debris. Yet his gut told him something was near, something just beyond the limits of the sensors, moving in the same slow orbit as his ship, hidden but present. Kane turned the ship to face the blue sun. Its light washed over the cockpit, sharp and cold. For a moment it seemed brighter than before, and he realized the hum was changing, shaping itself in a faint sound, like voices far away, whispering over one another, too soft to understand but impossible to ignore. He closed his eyes, and in that darkness the whispers became clearer. Not words yet, but images, flashes of the spire, of the pedestal holding the black half-sphere, of his own hand reaching for it. He jerked back to himself, gripping the controls. The ship's systems flickered again, the lights dimming and brightening in a slow rhythm that matched the hum. Kane knew now that whatever was beneath that planet had touched him, not in body but in thought. The hum was not just sound, it was a link, a thread between them, and if he was not careful it would pull him back. The blue sun ahead seemed to waver, its surface rippling like water, a shape forming in its light, tall and thin, shifting like smoke. It had no face, yet he felt its gaze, his breath caught in his throat. The figure reached toward him with hands made of shadow and flame, and the hum surged into a single sound. His name, spoken not in a voice, but in a thought so sharp it felt like it had cut into him. "Kane," it said, and then the vision was gone. The sun still cold and still. The ship's alarm broke the silence. Sensors detected a sudden shift below. Kane looked down to see the planet's surface changing, the cracks around the spire glowing with a light so bright it could be seen from orbit, lines of fire and crystal spreading out like veins, converging toward a single point in the southern hemisphere. The hum in his head matched the rhythm of the light, and he understood without knowing how that the prison was opening further. The shadow of light was stretching against its bonds, testing the strength of its cage. He checked the star charts. There was a Federation listening post less than 2 jumps away, but he hesitated. The hum grew warmer, softer, like a hand on his shoulder. The voice in his head now, clearer. It promised answers if he returned. It promised that the power in the spire could stop the shadow forever. If only he would take the key. It spoke of truth hidden from him by the Federation, of lies told to keep him small. It offered not just power, but understanding, and it spoke in a way that felt like it knew every thought in his mind. Kane shook his head, pulling the ship into a higher orbit. But the voice did not fade. It began to show him other visions, worlds burned black and silent, ships drifting in fields of shattered stone, and at the heart of it a shape like the one he had seen in the sun, shifting between shadow and flame. The voice said this was the future without his choice, the galaxy falling into silence as the shadow consumed all light. It told him he had the chance to stop it, but only if he returned now before. The prison fully broke, and it wrapped those words in a feeling that was almost comfort, almost trust. His hands hovered over the navigation controls, torn between the safety of distance and the pull of the world below. The hum in his head was not just sound now. It was a rhythm in his own heartbeat, a part of him. And the more he tried to push it away, the stronger it became, until it felt like the ship itself was breathing with it. The lights pulsing in time, the engines thrumming in the same slow beat. Suddenly the scanners lit up with movement, a small object rising from the surface near the spire, moving fast toward orbit. Kane locked onto it. The readings were strange, its mass far too heavy for its size, and its energy signature was identical to the black half-sphere in the pedestal. The hum flared sharp in his mind, the voice now urgent, telling him this was the key, that it was coming to him because it had chosen him, that he could still save everything if he accepted it. The object broke through the thin upper clouds and into space, its shape smooth and perfect, no engines, no lights. Yet it moved with speed and precision. Kane felt his hands move to guide the ship toward it without thinking, the hum filling every corner of his mind, his breath slowing, the edges of his vision fading until there was only the black shape against the cold light of the blue sun. It stopped just outside the hull. Hovering as if waiting for permission, the voice said one word now. Not his name, but yes. Kane's fingers trembled over the release for the docking bay. A single motion, and it would be inside. His alone to command or to destroy. The voice promised that the choice would still be his after, but he felt the weight of the lie in it, faint but there, a shadow behind the warmth. He closed his eyes, the hum growing louder until it was all there was, and somewhere deep in the noise he thought he heard not just the voice but others, dozens, hundreds, all speaking at once, their words lost but their fear clear, a fear not of him but of the thing that spoke to him. His eyes opened, the black sphere still waiting, the blue sun behind it casting cold light over the hull. Kane's hand hovered over the control, and he knew whatever choice he made now would bind him to a path that could not be undone. The black sphere hung in the void beyond the hull of the Iron Wing, motionless and silent. Its surface was like glass, but deeper than glass, holding no reflection and no light, yet somehow still shining. Kane stared at it, his breath slow and uneven, the hum in his head now so loud it was like the sound of his own heartbeat, but not his own heartbeat at the same time. It was inside him and around him, and everywhere the voice spoke again, soft but heavy, saying yes over and over each time, wrapping the word in warmth that felt almost human, almost like a friend who had always been there. His hand trembled over the docking control. If he pressed it, the sphere would be inside the ship. If he turned away, it would remain outside in the void, until something else found it. The voice whispered of power, of safety, of the ability to protect the galaxy from the shadow of light. It told him the Federation had no idea what was coming. It told him the prison was weakening faster than anyone believed. It told him only the key could strengthen the seals, and the key had chosen him, not the Federation, not the others who had come before and failed. Kane remembered the visions, worlds falling into black flame, ships drifting like dead leaves in a current. He thought of the faces of the crews he had served with, the people who would never see the danger coming until it was too late. He thought of his own failures, the missions where he had been too slow, too cautious. He felt the weight of those moments pressing against him, and the voice pressed with them, offering release, offering a way to make it right. But deep inside, another thought flickered, small and sharp like a spark, the memory of the whispers that had not been from the voice, the voices that had sounded afraid not of him, but of it. The fear had been raw and real, and it had not been meant for him to hear. The voice had been so quick to drown it out, to pull his focus away, yet he had heard it and could not unhear it. The black sphere drifted closer, without moving, as if the space between them was shrinking without either of them crossing it. Kane could see patterns in its surface, now faint and shifting like smoke under ice. They were the same patterns he had seen in the static on the comm panel, and in the carvings on the obelisk in the spire. They twisted and turned, and each time they turned, they seemed to show a new shape, a new meaning, just out of reach. The hum grew sharper, almost a vibration in his bones. Kane pulled his hand back from the control panel, his breath faster. Now the hum changed pitch, the voice no longer warm, but edged with something harder. It asked why in a tone that was still calm, but less like a friend and more like a judge. It asked if he wanted the galaxy to burn, if he wanted to be the one who could have stopped it, and did not. Kane said nothing out loud, but in his mind he thought of the Federation listening post just 2 jumps away. He thought of the chance to warn them, to bring others here to face whatever this was together. The voice did not like that thought. It pressed harder, filling his head with fire and shadow, showing him again the world's destroyed, showing him his own hands holding the half-sphere in the spire, showing him victory if he accepted it and ruin if he did not. The ship shuddered, a ripple of force moving through it from the direction of the sphere. The lights flickered and dimmed, the engines groaned. Kane gripped the controls and pulled the ship away, thrusters firing. The sphere did not move at first, then, without warning, it matched his path, without turning, without thrusting, simply being where it wanted to be. Kane pushed the engines harder, alarms blaring, the hum now like a roar filling every thought, every nerve. In the middle of the roar, he heard something else, faint and distant, like a call across water. It was not the voice, it was higher, sharper. It spoke no words, but the feeling it carried was different. It was not pulling or pushing, it was reaching. It felt like someone throwing a rope in the dark, hoping he would take it. Kane turned the ship toward the sound, not sure why, only knowing it was away from the sphere. The hum faltered for the first time. The sphere's surface changed, the patterns freezing into sharp lines, the warmth gone, now replaced by cold that cut through him. The voice spoke again, no longer asking, but commanding, saying stop, saying you will fail, saying you are mine. Kane's hands moved over the controls, his jaw tight. He dropped the ship into a steep dive toward the far side of the planet, using its shadow to break the line between him and the sphere. As the iron wings skimmed the upper atmosphere, flames licked the hull. The hum weakened, the voice calling his name again and again with a weight that tried to drag him back. But the other sound grew stronger, clearer, now a beacon pulse like the beating of a second heart. Not his, and not the voice. It led him toward the southern pole, where the light from the spire's cracks had not reached, where the ice plain shone silver under the blue sun. He broke through the clouds and saw it, a second spire smaller than the first, half buried in ice, its surface dark and smooth, without carvings or light. Yet the pulse came from within. Kane brought the ship low, landing on the frozen ground. The hum, now little more than a whisper, the sphere no longer in sight. He stepped out into the cold, the air thin and sharp, the ice crunching under his boots, the pulse steady in his chest. The smaller spire had an opening near its base, a jagged tear like something had broken free long ago. Kane stepped inside, the darkness cool and still, the walls smooth as glass, yet faintly warm to the touch. The pulse grew louder as he moved deeper until he came to a chamber where a crystal floated in the air, clear as water, yet glowing from within with soft white light. It was the opposite of the black sphere, where the sphere had pulled. This crystal pushed gently, not with force, but with presence, like sunlight on skin. Kane reached out his hand, the hum in his head shivered, as if afraid. The crystal moved toward him on its own, and when it touched his palm, there was no roar, no flood of fire, only silence, and a single thought, not a command, not a bargain, only a truth: you are not alone. The warmth of it spread through him, chasing the last of the hum away. The roar faded to nothing, and for the first time since leaving the spire, Kane could hear his own heartbeat again. He looked back toward the entrance, knowing the black sphere was still out there, knowing the shadow of light had not stopped moving, knowing the prison was still breaking, but he no longer felt the pull. He felt the weight of the crystal in his hand and the steady pulse it gave, and he knew the choice he had made was not the end, but the start. The ice plain around the smaller spire was silent under the cold blue light of the sun. Yet Kane felt the stillness breaking under something deep beneath the ground. The crystal in his hand pulsed faster, as if sensing the change. The hum of the black sphere was gone, yet the air carried a faint tremor, like the distant growl of a storm under the earth. Kane knew the prison was shifting, and that shift meant the shadow of light was no longer waiting, it was moving. The snow at his feet trembled and cracked, sending thin white lines racing outward across the plain. The crystal grew warmer in his hand, almost urgent. Kane turned toward the iron wing, but the sky above the horizon had already changed. What had been black space sprinkled with distant stars was now filled with a slow, rolling wall of red and gold flame that did not burn like fire, but twisted and folded in on itself like living smoke. The sight was wrong in every way, yet it was alive and vast. A voice rose from the edge of that storm, not the same as the sphere, but close, a deeper echo that carried weight and hunger. It said no name, yet Kane felt it looking through him. It spoke in a sound like grinding stone, mixed with whispers and languages he could not understand, but the meaning pressed in his mind. It was free, not fully, but enough to reach, and if it could reach, it could take, and if it could take, it would not stop. The ground erupted in a ring of jagged black glass far away on the plain, molten lines cutting across the ice in patterns Kane had seen before in the carvings on the tall spire. The patterns glowed red, the same red as the storm above. Each pulse of light sent a shock wave through the air, making the iron wing shake on its landing struts. Kane staggered forward, holding the crystal tighter, the warmth now almost too much to bear. From the tear in the horizon, the black sphere emerged again, but now it was larger, its surface burning with the same shifting red as the storm behind it. Kane understood now it had been a piece of the shadow, not the shadow itself, but the key that would open the prison fully. The sphere had come to take the crystal from him. The voice from the sphere returned, now cold and sharp. It told him the crystal was meant to join with it to restore balance to the galaxy, but he could hear the lie in its words. The balance it spoke of was only for itself. Kane ran toward the iron wing, the sphere drifting after him without sound, yet matching his every step. The snow turned to ice under his boots, and then to cracked black stone as the pulse from the ground grew stronger. The ship's engines came alive with a deep hum, but before he could reach the ramp, a column of flame rose in front of him, blocking the way. The flame did not burn the air, but it bent it, making the light bend and twist. He could see the shadow within it, moving like something with wings, yet no body. The crystal vibrated in his hand, and he felt a thought, not in words, but in feeling. It told him to go to the tall spire, the place where the patterns began. He looked back, the smaller spire behind him, still glowing faintly, the black sphere between him and the horizon, the storm closing in. He turned away from the iron wing and began to run across the plain toward the sharp line of mountains that hid the larger spire. The sphere followed, but slower now, as if the crystal pushed against it. The climb up the slope was steep, the ice cracking underfoot, yet the pulse from the crystal gave him strength each step, bringing the larger spire into view, its cracks glowing brighter than before. As if sensing the presence of the crystal, the hum from within the spire rose like the sound of 1,000 voices chanting. Without words, Kane reached the base and placed his hand against the smooth surface. The crystal flared white light, spilling through the cracks in every direction. The spire answered the pulse with one of its own, the ground shaking harder than before. The storm in the sky slowed its advance, the shadow within its flames twisting and folding on itself. As if in pain, the black sphere screamed without sound and rushed toward him, but the crystal's light spread like a shield across the base of the spire. The sphere struck the light, and recoiled lines of red racing across its surface, breaking into smaller shapes like fragments of glass floating in the air. Kane pressed the crystal into a shallow hollow at the base of the spire. It fit perfectly, the light flaring again, this time shooting upward in a column so bright it cut through the storm above. The red and gold flame recoiling away from the beam. The voice of the shadow roared now in anger, its hunger burning hotter. But unable to cross the light, the beam expanded, its edges tearing at the storm, peeling it back toward the breach it had come through. Kane saw the far edge of the plain through the gap, stars beyond, and the faint blue curve of another world untouched by the shadow. The sphere tried again to push through the light, its surface cracking now, pieces breaking away and vanishing in sparks of red. The patterns that had shifted endlessly now froze like stone. The crystal's pulse became a steady thrum, each beat sending another wave through the ground into the sky. The spire's hum turned into a single long note, rising higher until it was almost more felt than heard. The storm's edge met the light, and the clash filled the air with a sound like the tearing of metal and the crash of a wave together. Kane held his ground, his body shaking under the force. The shadow's voice shouted promises and threats in the same breath, telling him he would burn with it, telling him he would be the last, telling him the crystal would fail. But the crystal did not fail. Each pulse pushed the storm back further, until at last the breach began to close, the red and gold folding it on, itself like water spiraling down into a drain. The last fragment of the sphere shattered into dust, the dust hanging in the air for a moment before vanishing like smoke. The ground under Kane's feet steadied. The beam of light dimmed until only the cracks in the spire glowed faintly again. The hum faded to silence. The air was cold and still. The storm gone. The sky clear, the stars sharp and steady above. Kane fell to one knee, his breath loud in the quiet. The crystal still in the hollow at the base of the spire pulsed once more, then went still. It did not fade, but it no longer moved. The spire stood silent, as if nothing had happened. Yet Kane knew the prison had been sealed again, not forever, but long enough. He looked out across the plain at the smaller spire far away, and the faint glint of the iron wing on the ice. He knew there would be questions from the Federation. He knew they would want to study the spire, the crystal, maybe even try to use it. But he also knew he could not tell them everything. Some truths were not meant for all ears. Some truths carried weight that could crush the wrong hands. The wind returned across the plain, light and cold. Kane stood again, his body heavy, but his mind clear. The shadow of light was not gone, but it was not free, and somewhere beyond the stars others still watched, waiting for the day it would rise again. But until then he would carry the memory and the map in his mind and be ready for the call when it came.